Hello and good day, everyone. We're so glad that you're here with us on our webinar on strategic business planning. And this is our very first session. It's myself and Joe Clarke. And Joe is our subject matter expert on all things regarding business planning. Thank you for being with us during this lunch hour. As we go through, we're going to talk a little bit about the day and all the topics and things that we're going to be talking about. And let me see here.
That was it. Okay.
There we go. All right. Let me see. Going forward. And when you're thinking about your business plan and you're looking at all the different things, you have creative ideas, there's things that you want to encapsulate about what it is that you would like to do. You know that you have passion around a particular area, and so you know that you need information. But how do you plot it around the circle? How do you decide what goes there? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And how to enjoy today's webinar. What we would like for you to do is that if you have questions as we're going along, feel free to raise your hand. All the attendees are going to be in listen-only mode, but you can type your questions to Janine Finch, who is our colleague here in AED, and you can ask her all the questions, and we'll be sure to get to them, Joe and I, at the end. There's going to be an entire Q&A seminar. If you have additional questions and would like to meet with Joe and do a one-on-one session about your business plan, or would like to set up an appointment, feel free to call us at 703-228-0808, and you'll also have our emails at the end. This is just not a one and done, you know, you hear from us at lunchtime, and then we go away and you go off and do your thing. No, it can definitely be a group effort in a way that we can help you to do what you need to do in order to launch your business. And so my friend Joe that's here, I've known Joe for several years now. Yeah. I would say about 10 years.
About 10 years, yeah.
About 10 years I've known Joe. And he's an amazing mentor that we have here in Arlington through our initiative with SCORE. Joe has a wealth of background and experience in both the federal sector and in IT consulting in the commercial endeavor, working as a consultant with clients in these different fields. Right. He's also worked for many, many years and retired from Gartner Consulting, has several different expertises. One is in ITEL. And the coolest thing about Joe is he was in the Coast Guard and did some really neat things there. And in order to set up your appointment with him, just feel free to call us or drop us a line on Joe's email.
Correct.
Is that the best way?
That sounds just about right. The only thing I would add is that in addition to working at Gartner, which is sort of a big business company, also spent time, I've created two small companies on my own at different times, and also I went with one company before going to Gartner where we grew from about 9 people to 150 people.
Wow,
so
okay.
Seen it from both sides.
You've seen it from both sides.
Small and big.
Experience.
That's right.
Wow, okay. We'll go to the next slide. And our agenda today is Joe is going to talk about the business plan and the purpose behind it, what the format should be, and how do you plan to succeed? How do you go through step by step by step by step? And then we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A for your questions. And with that, Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you. Just so you all also know, I'll be on Twitter. I'll be live tweeting some of Joe's comments. We're going to try to maximize your experience today on social media. And with that, Joe, without further ado,
fantastic.
I'm turning it over to you, my friend.
All set to go. All right. Great. Well, as we're talking about this whole idea of the business plan, and I think this is one of those areas that gets in people's minds, that plays games with their minds, their heads. And they set up these unrealistic expectations of what the business plan and the business plan process is all about, and makes it very difficult for them. And once you stop and take a step back and start understanding what do we really mean when we're talking about business plans and the business planning process, it really is very simple, very straightforward, type of things that everybody can do and do very effectively. I think we just need to break through that barrier, that fear factor, if you will, of what it is that this is all about and how this all works together. So what we thought we'd cover today was the first part is what is a business plan, just trying to get people to understand that and see what type of function it has, what purpose does it have, and why are you doing this? What are you trying to get out of this? That's a critical success factor for deciding what you're going to put in this, how this all is going to work, and what do you do with it after you've gotten it. There's a format for a business plan, and again, there's many, many different formats out there, but really this is just one that many people will expect to see the topics covered in the business plan, and that's what we really want to put on there. But the big part of this is that last item, the business planning process. I want to walk through that with you to get you to have an understanding of what type of things you're considering as you're doing this, and then how do you put that together and describe that to the reader so that they basically get a better appreciation of what it is you are trying to do with this business. So with that, let's get into it. What is a business plan is a document that then says what is the purpose of the business, what are the plans, what are the business trying to accomplish in the near-term future. So you're identifying your company's goals and aspirations, what are your objectives, what are you trying to be successful at, and lays it out. Think of it as a company's resume. Say who we are, what are we doing, why are we here, and how are we pulling this all together. Now, what is key factor on this is that you have to be laying out the various aspects of the operation of the business. You're describing to the reader what it is that you plan for operations, what do you plan for finances, what do you plan for marketing, and all the various aspects that are involved in getting this business moving along and marching toward the objectives of the company. Now, what we're trying to do is really figure out what resources are needed to get to your objective. How many people you got to hire? How much money do you need in funding? What type of equipment do you need? All those aspects that are going to say what resources we're going to use and how we're going to make them all work. Along those same lines, what you're looking for are the unexpected events, those things that could happen that may throw you off or maybe accelerate your growth. What are the unexpected contingencies and how prepared are you to handle those and manage those as they come up? Now, a big part from it depends on who your gatekeeper is. If the gatekeeper is a loan officer, they may be saying, that's great, this is wonderful, and how are you going to pay me back? So they want to know what the funding is, how is that going to work, and can you afford the cost of the loan, which includes not only the principal payments, but then the interest that goes along with that. The other aspect, the other thing that a business plan does and can be used for is helping to keep everybody involved in this, all your stakeholders, aware of what it is you're trying to do and what are the objectives of the plan. Now, those stakeholders could be your suppliers, they could be your employees, they could be your investors. It could be a number of people that all need to then be aware of what it is you're trying to do, and so they can see how things are moving along those lines. Now, the purpose, the reason you write this, and this is an important slide to point out some very different priorities. As you'll notice in this slide, when we go into this, we talk about things that are all internal. How are you going to get organized? What should be the focus? What goals are we going to have? How do we understand the market and understand how we fit into that market? How are we going to measure our progress as we're going along and seeing whether or not we're making sufficient progress, or do we need to modify things midway along rather than waiting for the end to see if we were successful. We talk about many of the risks that you have to look forward, seeing, if this happens, what will be the impact on my business plan? And then have contingency plans ready for that. Then finally, becoming aware of what are your strengths and weaknesses. What are the things that you're doing that will give you a competitive advantage? And what are the weaknesses that you're going to have to find ways around, things that you can offset those weaknesses? Those are all the things. This is the internal, introspective look at what's going on with the company and what your goals are and how you're going to achieve those. At the end of this, once you've set up how you're going to measure this, what your milestones are, then at the end of this, there may be somebody who says, show me your business plan. It could be a loan officer. It could be an investor. It could be landlord who's not going to sign a lease with you until they say, show me your business plan. Unfortunately, I get a lot of people that come in and say, I've been told I need a business plan. What do I do? How do I get this? And reality is that the most important gatekeeper that you have is yourself. You should be looking at all of these items. You should be evaluating these things and making an internal decision on whether or not this business idea is something that is viable and sustainable, or is it do you have to modify your plans to get to something that can be sustained? So the real point on this is that every single business needs a business plan. Only those that have a gatekeeper or somebody who's going to approve what you are asking for are going to need the document and have the physical artifact out there. So the plan itself is what most people focus on, but what's really most important is the planning process, the thought process that goes into coming up with that document. That's the one that matters the most. All right, so let's get into it. The format. There's 1,000 formats of business plans, but basically what you're trying to do is you want to tell people what it is that you're giving them. That's the cover letter. You should put a non-disclosure agreement in there simply because you're going to be exposing a lot of information, competitive information that you don't want to have distributed freely. The biggest item, the first thing that people are going to read and the one that they're going to concentrate on the most is the executive summary. And that, by the way, is the part of the business plan you should write last. You should get everything worked out, understand what it is that you're saying with your business, and then summarize that in the executive summary, but also use that as a sales pitch. That should be concise. It should be well-written and rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. That's the one that needs the heaviest amount of editing. Get it concise and powerful, and it should not be more than a page or two. If it goes longer than that, you're going to lose your focus, and the reviewer will only look at that and then put down the plan and not go any further. So the executive summary is probably the most critical one, but it's the one that has to be done after you've gotten all of the other parts of the plan together. The other items that you see, the company direction, the company overview, what products and services you're offering, and what the market analysis is, those are your standard types of things that most people are going to be looking for. We're going to talk a little bit about those as we go through here. The marketing plan, the financial plan, and any supporting documentation are the artifacts or the part of the plans that support what you're trying to do with your sales projection. All of this we're going to cover in the next slide here that'll pull this all together. So let me present this material to you. You'll have it available for reference, but let's go into the details of the process. And once that's in place, once you see how that all works and flows together, then the rest of this will make some sense. All right, so I'll start out, clean slate. We're going to go through the thought process of what it is that your business is going to do and how you're going to pull this all together and make it work properly. Well, first thing you start with is you define your product or service. It works for either one. You're doing something that you know people will be willing to pay you money for. That's the basic premise of a for-profit business, that you have something that you're offering to the public, and they want that, and they're willing to pay you money for it. Now, tangentially, if you're a nonprofit, it still all applies. It's just that your profit level is supposed to get to zero, but you still have to understand where's the revenue coming from, be it donations or subsidized sales, or then what are the expenses that are required to deliver that. So all the same concepts apply for profits or nonprofits. But let's start with the basic thought process that you're doing something or providing a product that people are willing to pay you money for. The first question you should have is, who are the people that are willing to pay money for this? It's not going to be everybody. There'll be some people who will find this valuable to them and be willing to part money in order to get it. So that's the market you're going after. The next thing is you have to realize there are other people out there who can offer the same product or a similar product or an alternative product that may be more attractive to your customers. So you have to, people start off saying, I have a brand new idea and I have no competition. There's a wide open field. And I say there's got to be a problem with that thought process, because customers do not have a limitation on where they can spend their money. So what you have to do is identify what it is you're offering, who are the people that want it, and who else is offering this as an alternative, and then what are their characteristics. From there, you come up with a plan. A plan that says, how am I going to inform this market about what it is that I have to offer? And the marketing plan, the idea that if I build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to my door, is pure garbage. It's just not going to happen.
Doesn't work that way?
Doesn't work that way. What you have to do is you have to actively go out there and let people know about your product, let them know what it is that you're doing and how to buy that and why they should buy from you. That's the marketing plan. Given the marketing plan, laying that all out, as well as doing a consideration of how big the market is and who the competition is, given that marketing, executing on that marketing plan, you should have a projected amount of sales that you're going to be making. You have targets. Here's how much I plan to sell of my product or service by when. So month by month, you're laying out what it is that you expect to be able to sell. This is the area, this is one of the most important aspects of the business plan. It's also the one that drives people crazy. For whatever reason, they say, I can't possibly come up with a number. How do I know until I go out and do it how much I'm going to get? The answer I give people is, think of it as a target. It's not saying that here is exactly what I'm going to have as sales, but I'm looking at what am I going to aim at? What am I trying to achieve? What goal do I have on a month-by-month basis? The other thing to keep in mind is you're going to have two factors in that sales projection that need to be accounted. The first is seasonality. Your product probably won't sell the same amount all times of the year. Also, there's a ramp-up. And until people learn about you, you're going to have slow sales, and then as they learn and as you move forward, your sales should grow. So when I look at a sales projection, I want to see seasonality if it's appropriate, but also a ramp up. All right, so given that, if you put together this projection and you feel, okay, I think this is what I can sell by when, then the rest of this should all fall right out from that from a logical progression. I should be able to say, what operations do I need in order to execute and support that level of sales? What type of organization should be in place to be able to make decisions effectively and to be able to manage and control things? From there, I should be able to see what resources are needed to execute and fulfill the sales that I'm projecting. And then finally, what are the finances? Now, you put all that together, and I'm fairly comfortable projecting that the first time you do this, the bottom line is going to be atrocious. Either you're going to be operating at a loss, or you're going to be operating at such a high profit that you will never get the resources needed to execute on that. Your first cut at this is probably going to be wrong. That's what I'm trying to say. So what you need to do when it is off is you loop back up to defining the product or service and saying, how do I modify that? What do I change? Do I add a different region? Do I add a different product feature? Do I change my product, which now will appeal to a different market and have different competitors, and go through the whole process flow again? This is an iterative process that you keep moving back through until you get your aha moment that says, hey, I can pull this off. This is doable. That's what you're looking for. That's your telltale.
So you may not, Joe, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
please.
You may not have it exactly the way you want it, but doing the planning this way will help you to fine-tune.
It does two things. One, it helps you narrow your focus or broaden your focus, whichever way you need to go. Mm-hmm. It helps you identify what it is that has to be changed. But most importantly, you've got to keep it consistent all the way through. Wow. Let me give you an example. If you don't go through the whole flow, you could end up saying, okay, I need my price higher in order to make the profits that I want.
Yeah.
Therefore, I'm going to raise it now. Well, I've raised my prices, so now I'm niche market prices. But have I defined my product in a way that is really a niche? And am I appealing to a market that wants that niche? And it's where you don't go all the way through that you get inconsistencies in what you're offering and what you're planned. You've got to tie your sales forecast down with an operational plan that is related to that, and then also fit in to the market that you're aiming at. Until you loop it through again, you can very easily get things off, and you will get misconnects, and you'll be basically trying to offer a commodity at a niche price, and nobody will buy it.
Is this what happens to certain businesses when they get started and they're perceiving that things are going a certain way but maybe haven't gone back through the process?
That's part of it. I think another thing the thing I find most often is that people will undercut themselves as startups.
Okay.
They will do things like they will see what the value is. They'll have a fairly good idea of the value. They may do the market research and say, here's what people are willing to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they'll do is they'll say, well, you know what, in order to jumpstart things, I'm going to cut my price and get a bunch of sales, and then I'll raise my prices later. And, well, that doesn't work very well is one thing. But more importantly, what you're doing is you're telegraphing to the market that your product or service is not really worth that much.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the price I'm charging, and it's not related to the value that you're offering. So you undercut yourself. And until you go through this analysis and keep looping through this, you tend to miss some of those connections. Now, let me throw out one other part on this, and that's nomenclature.
Okay.
You'll hear people talking about different parts of the business planning process and use terminology like the value proposition.
Yes, you hear that a lot.
Right. Well, you want to understand what is it really saying and where does it fit into this process.
Mm-hmm.
The value proposition, which has three parts to it, it says, what is the problem you're solving for the customer? The second part of it is who is the customer that wants that solved? And the third part is what differentiates me from the competition?
Mm.
Now that very concisely worded, very short, succinct message really is I've taken care of the first portion of this analysis of what am I offering, who am I offering it to, and why am I better than the competition? That then leads to a target market. You're saying, okay, I'm going to take these people. I've identified who I want, who responds to that value proposition. And the idea here is you don't want to market to people who are not going to buy from you.
Right. That's a waste of dollars.
Unless you want to buy a Super Bowl ad and pay all that money, you want to only market to those people who are most likely going to be buying from you. Your ideal would be not to spend $1 more in marketing than sales that you're going to be getting. You want to get all the sales out of you can. So you want to be selective in whom you market to. That requires you to understand who the market is and how do they want to be approached. What marketing channels do they want to use? Now, the message that you're using in that is based on the competition. What is it that the competition offers? What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses?
Okay.
So you can then match your product and offering to minimize their strengths and take advantage of their weaknesses. There's a fantastic TV commercial, I think it was for Staples if I'm not mistaken. And the visual scene is you have a person in front of their little brick building and they're offering haircuts. And across the street all this construction starts. And this big, huge building goes in and it's something like super cuts or something like that, $10 haircuts. So this small business owner is doomed. They're lost. They've got all these people going to come in. They're undercutting everything. He's going to be dead. The next thing you have is, and this is why it's an ad for Staples, is the guy bought a sign in Staples, and the sign he puts up there says, "We repair $10 haircuts." And he's doing great, and the big Supercuts place is out of business.
Right there.
So the point it illustrates, you look at somebody else's strengths or weaknesses, and then you use that in how you differentiate yourself. That's sort of the takeaway message on that.
Right.
Your marketing campaign takes that marketing message, targets it to a select group of people in a segment of the market, and you are trying to get that to them with your differentiating statement in place. All of that leads you then to set up those targets. And those targets are what your sales projection. That's what you think you're going to be able to do by when. Given that, you lay out your operational plan, which gives you the hours of operation, the staff, the resources that are needed, the organizational structure, but most importantly, the finances. All of those give you your 3 financial statements that you need, the profit and loss, the cash flow, and the balance sheet. Then we have to know what is the break-even point. How much sales do I have to do so that I cover all of my fixed and variable costs and I start making a profit? That's a point that's easily calculated based on what your projections are and what your cost models are. And that can then be put together to say how much business do you need to get to in order to be profitable. That's a go, no-go decision. And if you see a relatively low number there, then it's a good chance this is going to be successful. If that sales projection is really high, well, then you may be running negative for quite some time. So that's the one important one. The benchmarks are we comparing your company to other people. And we have tools and capabilities, and the business librarian in the Arlington County Library can help you tremendously in getting that information together. And then how much money you need, and where are you going to get it from, and what are you going to do with it? Those are the things that the documents, the artifacts that you're producing as part of this whole process. What do you lay together? And these are the key items, the key things you're trying to get out of the business plan. Now, next week we'll talk about the finance stuff and how to come up with that and what those all look like. But for this, what I wanted to do was at least give an overview of the whole process. And this is the thing that's most important, that you understand that there is this process flow and that when you modify something, it has to ripple all the way through because you change your product, you change your price. That's going to impact all the things, even going to what marketing campaign you have to use. All of those are to achieve the goals that you laid out, the operational goals that you show.
And this really helps you to start to take that idea that you have and puts it down to paper and starts to make it real.
And you have to go through this process to identify, at least on paper, does this thing make sense? Do a reality check, and it's much easier to crank the numbers, do that, than it is to go ahead and I've got people that came in, they said their plan was, here's my money, I'm going to use it, I'm going to see if I can, in business for 2 years and see if I'm profitable. Not a great plan, not a good way of thinking about things. Test it out on paper first, get another set of eyes to come in there and do a reality check.
A third party.
An objective, unbiased review that says, does this make sense? And all of these things are really what you should be doing before you invest your time and effort and money in testing this out.
How long typically does this take?
Typical business plan, I would say maybe 2 or 3 weeks would be sufficient. Again, start at the right level. Start at a like 30,000-foot height where you're flying over things, get the rough outline of things, understand it. If that makes sense, then dive down into more detail. Now, you may never get down to the weeds. You may never get down to tree level. You may stay higher. If everything looks fairly good at that level, that's all you should go down to. If there's an area that looks problematic, I'd want to go down into the details, into the weeds on that to verify whether or not that's going to work.
Okay.
But what I wanted to point out, as you're going through this, is a whole lot of places that you can get information. BizLaunch numbers shows up quite a bit. Arlington County Library, I mentioned, is a phenomenal resource for all of things like market size, looking into things like how many companies are in a particular segment, doing things like saying within any zip code, what are the characteristics of the consumers that live there? And you can then find out from zip code by zip code how much of that population matches the demographic profile that you have in mind. Point being, I have a tremendous amount of information that can help you as you flesh out your business plan. You guys in BizLaunch does the CoStar reports, which will give you information on a individual location. How many people live there, how many people work there, how many companies are there within a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius. So you can get very specific very easily. All sorts of different any economic development agency in your area, if it's not Arlington, is going to have a lot of this information together. So that should be one of your first stops, to get with them and get information from them so you have that pulled together to flesh out the details of your business plan. And that was what I was planning for the presentation part of this that we would cover. But I think maybe we should open it up to some questions.
Yeah, and I actually may start first. Joe, I'm going to come and join you over here maybe. But my first question for you, and I know we talk a lot to small businesses, what are some of, as people are developing and designing their business plan, what are some of the things that you noticed straight up that people have missed out on doing?
There are a couple of things I guess I would point out. The biggest thing I see is people are starting a business typically because they have some knowledge, some expertise in a particular product or service that they're ready to offer. And they delve into that. So they know if it's cooking, exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to do that, and what ingredients to use, what type of oven they need, what type of all the rest of it. They're phenomenally knowledgeable in their individual craft, product, or service that they're offering. That's the wrong focus for the business plan. They tend to focus in on the delivery of that individual product, which, while it's important, is not as important as the business functions that are going to need to surround that in order to deliver that at a profitable level. So things like marketing, things like how you're going to handle sales, how are you going to do administrative portions of this, how are you going to work the business around delivery of that idea. So the first caution I give you is don't focus only in on your internal product or service. Think about how you're going to run the business and how you're going to look at the market and see it from a customer's point of view. What are you offering of value?
Okay.
That's one. Related to that is jargon.
Yes.
People delve down into the nitty-gritties of their product or service, and they're in talking about things that a business reviewer knows very little about and could care less.
They know the surface.
Right. So you got to get away from just being the jargon, the technical aspect of what it is that you're doing, and get more into a description of what the business is going to be like.
Very succinct, very clear, very focused.
Right, and in terminology that is relatable to the audience. The audience will be different depending on what audience you're going to. You're going to emphasize different parts of your business plan. If you're going to investors, you're going to be talking about the market and what the market share is and how much profitability there may be in that. If you're going to a lender, you need to be talking about, okay, why is this doable? Do I have the capacity to pay back my loan and be able to make them feel very little risk associated with what you're doing?
So the business plan itself could have a different tone depending on who the audience is.
Right. Think of it more, the business process, the planning process remains the same. The portion of that you emphasize and report out
in the
document, well, the executive summary, but also throughout the whole document.
Throughout the
so a lender is going to be focusing in on the financials, your cash flow, things like that. So they're going to look at all those details. The executive summary should highlight the strengths and weaknesses of that. But the point is that document, the business plan you write for a lender looks different than the business plan you write for an investor, or even the business plan that you write for a landlord. It should be the same process, but three different artifacts depending upon who it is that it's intended for.
I guess the bones are the same,
right,
but the meat might be different.
No, let me change your analogy, okay?
Analogy.
The content is the same, the presentation is different.
Got you.
So instead of being served on paper plates with plastic utensils, it's
china.
Set up with the china and the real stuff. It's a matter of what part of the plan do you focus and emphasize. Depends on what the audience is looking for.
Okay. One question that or something that I see that a lot of people do is that they may or may not pay themselves a salary as they're looking at first-year numbers. As a new startup company, what would you recommend as people are plugging in their numbers and figuring things out? Do you pay yourself? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the business plan, in order to be sustainable, has got to account for your labor. A business owner has two forms of compensation. There's compensation for the work that they do, and that should be at a market rate. And then there is the profit or loss of the business that's added to that compensation. So the total compensation is the profitability of the business plus the labor that they're putting into that business. If you don't account for that, in effect, you're cooking the books.
Yeah.
You're presenting numbers that are really not sustainable. I always view it as, if you had to replace yourself and hire somebody to do that function, what would it cost? And your business plan, to be truly sustainable, should account for that cost.
That's right.
Now, whether or not the owner does a draw and takes money out is a secondary issue. Your plan and the love and where you're planning to be profitable should account for that salary in there. You may decide not to take the salary in order to leave the retained earnings in there for cash flow purposes.
Yes.
That's possible. I certainly would defer a salary rather than taking out a loan
right.
to be able to pay that.
Right.
That's a separate decision, but the plan itself should account for the labor that you're doing.
Because that could eventually be a red flag.
Right.
If
if there's no compensation, the reviewer is going to say, what's this ain't real. yeah.
Now, Janine, I'm going to reach out to you to see if we have any questions from our audience that's attending the webinar today.
Hey everyone, yes, we do have a few questions. The first one we have is, how can we do the segmentation and targeting? If you guys have any advice on that.
The segmentation and targeting, is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay. Again, this is a matter of looking at what the value proposition is. So think about it this way. If I'm offering something that will resonate with a particular market segment, I want to try to identify that. So if I'm offering something that is, I had a person who was coming in, they were going to basically take people's heirloom photographs, scan them, pull them together as part of album presentations, and then sell that to the customer all as a service. In that scenario, what's going on is you have to understand what is it that you are doing that customer values. And what's critical on that is that you do it from the customer's perspective, not your own perspective. So you get inside that customer's head and say, what is it about what I'm offering that's valuable? Now, is it because this person is reaching an age that is now where all of these heirlooms could be lost and they're worried about that and they want to try and preserve this to pass on to other generations? Is it because they're, let's say, younger parents with preschool-aged children and they have all these things going on, but they don't have time to pull it together and they're afraid they're going to lose things or miss out on that? What's the motivation on that? Now, that understanding that value that you're offering then gives you the clues on what the market segmentation is. If I'm looking for in the first case of preserving the heirlooms, in that case I may pick a different age bracket. I may also pick a different demographic of finances to say who's not going to be willing to pay money to have this done, but who is going to have at least a certain income level that will allow me to then be offering my services. So you look at those clues from the value proposition to try to identify who your market is. Once you've identified who the characteristics of your market, that's where you get in line with some of the research, like the services available at the Arlington Central Library, where you can take, given different characteristics of market segments, you can identify where they are, how big that group is, and other characteristics that might define what marketing channel would they expect to see your offering. That's what I would suggest is the logic process to go through to identify the different segments and then target them specifically.
And then that also helps you with your competition, because then you can also see what's currently out there. Like I think of some of these services like a Shutterfly or something like that allows you to create memory books, but maybe their demographic is different than for this.
Right, and in any of these, if you go out and look at your competition, then you are, and especially if you're going to charge a price point that's higher than theirs, then what are you doing to justify that price point differential? What offering, what service do you have to put in there that will justify collecting that higher fee? And in that case, it may be that you have to then emphasize the personal interaction that you will have, where you will do
service will sit down.
You'll do an interview. You'll talk and find out what are the things that are important to that customer versus somebody just doing an online service that doesn't have that interaction.
That makes sense.
So you do the SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses of the competition. But you have to then pick if you are operationally forced to have a higher price in order to be profitable, then you have to find out how are you going to justify that with the services that you're offering, and use that as part of the targeted marketing. Your value proposition is now different, and you're emphasizing and focusing those things that will be important to that market segment. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
Was there another
additional question?
Yeah, we do. We have another question. This participant is asking or mentioned that they train on leadership, negotiations, and advocacy. The trainings are experimental, so people who take the trainings think it's great and come back for more. They're mentioning that it's hard for them to branch out into the private sector to entice them with their value proposition because they don't actually have a product they can point to show its quality. What should they do, or what would you recommend they do to reach new clients who have never heard of them, let alone been trained by them before?
In the IT world, we had a thing we called use cases. And what it was you develop a scenario that you would be walking a person through. And as they went through that different scenario, different things would happen, or different features would be exposed, or different capabilities would be required as you went through that whole process, that scenario. You might try the same type of thing here, and building a scenario that would say, what is it that is a deficiency that is being solved by that leadership training? And by setting up that scenario has to be customized and tailored to the market that you're going after. So if it's now in the commercial world, now going for government, or whatever way you want to slice this, you have to take that scenario and tailor it to that environment. The concept would be that you then have something that you can work with somebody on. Say, do you ever have this as a problem? If you get their attention and get them to accept that, yes, we do have this problem because it's been expressed in their environment and their nomenclature. Now, here's where we've gotten solutions on this and where this has been effective. So it's setting up a scenario that a customer can relate to, and then doing the translation by testimonial or whatever technique to say how this has been solved in this different environment. Now, whenever you go from one market to another, the problem is that you're asking the customer to do that translation and say that this prior experience is applicable to their environment. Many customers are not willing to do that. And what you will have to do is you'll have to do that for them or lead them through that process in order for your prior testimonials to be relevant to their market. So the burden's on you when you're doing that, but it is doable and can have the advantage if nobody else has done that, then you're becoming a niche solution that might be very attractive.
Now, what do you think, Joe, about doing focus groups? Like if you're going to enter into a new market,
right.
You have an existing market, and to kind of get feedback that way.
Yeah, very much so. If you have access to that, get some representative stakeholders from that market, sit with them, and find out. First of all, do exploration, find out what it is that their concerns are, and then see if your product or service is applicable to that. If so, then how do you present that?
Yeah, because I think that might be a good way as you enter into a new market.
But you've got to, whatever your offering is, if it's not easily relevant to that market, then you've got to be able to say why that is relevant.
Yeah, and I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, and the burden's on you because the customer will not do that.
No. And sometimes I think we think that we know what the customers want when the reality is it might be something.
Yeah. My field is notorious for doing that poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, IT, we have all the bells and whistles. We say all these great things, but you customers go figure out how you're going to use it. So I don't have a lot of bragging room there, but the concept I do understand.
There, yeah. Do you need any other questions?
Just one follow-up question is if all of their networks are in government NGOs, would you guys have any advice on opportunities to reach the private sector clients?
Yeah, what I found is that, well, first of all, an awful lot of those involved in the government market split their customer base between government and commercial. So to the extent that your networking gives you some insight into, say, particular prime contractors or ones that also have operations in the commercial sector, then you might be able to use them as references or at least touch points to expand into that commercial sector. So, for example, if you're dealing with a prime contractor in the government space, and they're very pleased with what it is that you're doing, then explore with them whether other parts of their organization that have more commercial clients might find this useful also.
Great advice. Great question. Very good question. Just to follow up with some of the thoughts and things that we were having, what would you recommend people to do? Now, I know you said it would take 2 to 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're working full-time on this and you're putting everything, the sauce and the cream and everything together, when should they come and see someone like you? Early on? How's the timing work?
Early on or earlier? As soon as possible, because rather than having the risk of spinning your wheels or getting frustrated by something, come in, talk to a SCORE counselor, get a better understanding, a better feel for what it is that you should do, and then make that a process where you work in tandem with the mentor. I'm certainly used to people coming in, I've got an idea and I have no idea what to do about this, or where do I go from here, all the way to I've got my business plan ready, I need somebody to review it, and anywhere in between. SCORE can work with you every step along the way and help you get to that point where you're comfortable that this is a plan that is executable and sustainable. And that's what we help people do.
And I think I find it very, if you can put things down, if you can write down exactly what your vision, and like to me, changing a market is a huge deal because what you have to put into it, you know, and making sure. But then to be able to have somebody review the information and to get that kind of unbiased feedback is priceless. And I encourage people to plan, because what we see in this launch is sometimes when people have gotten in trouble, you know, as you were saying, as you go along that cycle, and there's a hiccup where something, whether it's the target market or new competition or something, and then people are using that old playbook and they haven't updated it. And so to be able to reach out before that goes along, you know, before you've made change is very important.
It is, and it's the idea that, well, quite frankly, most of the things that people come in and say, oh my gosh, this thing happened, I never expected it, never seen this before, are things that we've seen before. So
that's true.
There's not a whole lot of new crises or new things. They may take a different form and a different
industry, maybe
flavor, but they're pretty much so. It's happened to somebody else before, and we can walk you through it.
And the cool thing is, for this exact webinar, we've talked today, everybody, about, you know, how to get those ideas on the paper, how to go through the process. We're going to be doing this on the 17th of October, where we actually look at the financials. Because, Joe, I know you spoke about the importance of the financials and making sure to get those numbers right. But there's a real way that you can set that up. So I encourage everybody that's on the webinar today to definitely sign up for the follow-up, because we go into depth into the financials.
You know, I think it's valuable in today's session to lay the context of what is the business planning process, how this all fits together. But when it comes to actually starting your plan, I always recommend you start at the numbers. I'm a numbers person by bias, so I have to confess that. But more importantly, if I've laid out my sales projection and I know I need 10 new customers this month, then my marketing plan is a lot more specific. Instead of using the platitudes, I'm going to go out and use social media and make people aware of us. What does that do?
Social media is hard.
All right. But if I have a marketing plan that says I need 50 customers in the first quarter each month and then going to 100 customers, new customers in the second quarter, now I've got something very specific and I can target, and my marketing plan is much more concrete and avoids the platitudes, which I hate. In most of the business plans you read, it's too much of it.
Wonderful.
We're going to be customer centric and we're going to value customer service. Thank you very much. But what are the specifics? So I always start with the numbers first, because then I'm going after things that are much more concrete. So that's my exposing my personal bias.
But I think there's truth to that, because as you go through and you fine tune and you're putting meat with the potatoes, it makes it really real and executionable.
Right.
Because the business plan really is minimizing your risk as you move forward.
Absolutely.
So, well, Janine, any other questions?
Yes, we have one final question, and it is, what is your opinion on Amazon as a way to reach new customers? Would that dilute the market segmentation effort?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Whenever you start, well, think of it this way in my mind. Part of my work as a business owner is that I have to do market research, I have to do marketing activities to get the word out, and then I have to do sales and sales fulfillment and all those functions, those business functions that I have to do. Now, if I hire somebody else to do those, i.e. hire Amazon, and have them, then I'm going to pay them a fee, and that's how I would evaluate their fee. Is that worth having this marketing done? Certainly, things like Amazon, things like many of these services provide, because of the basics of their platforms and their reach, they are basically doing a lot of the marketing work for you. So if you're saying I'm gonna subcontract that out to them, then you can start making a legitimate trade-off analysis of how much you're willing to pay for that. Most people just gripe about the cost of these other services. I say, well, what are you getting for that, and is that worth the fee that you're paying? Certainly, if somebody has an installed base and you're offering a product that is complementary to things that are out there already, then that makes a lot of sense. Does it make a lot of sense if their base is offering competing products or services where you're fighting against them? Maybe, maybe not. So I have to give the consultant answer on it depends. But think of it as what you're getting for the fee that you're paying.
And is it worth it?
Yeah. That's the trade-off analysis.
Is it worth it?
Well, what would it cost you to do that on your own?
Ooh. And it could be a launching pad into different opportunities.
Could be, yeah. And I mean, I view the same analysis when I look at fulfillment services for many of them.
Yeah.
What would it take me to do that on my own? And is it better, even things like payroll services, like what would it take me to learn that and do that versus paying that fee?
And then you're apples to apples where you're analyzing exactly, I guess, what the return on investment for doing particular A, B, C.
Yeah, you've got to get an understanding of what is the service that you're buying and what's the comparable cost of doing it yourself.
That makes sense. Okay, well, thank you so much, Janine, and to everybody out there who has participated in our lunch webinar. I'm going to give a huge thank you to Joe Clarke, who was our presenter today for our strategic business planning, and we're looking forward on October 17th to follow up on the financials, and we hope that you'll be able to join us then. Thank you, everybody, and have an amazing day. Thank you so much, Joe.
All right.
And then I'm just going to